I've noticed there's just so much overlap in all of our themes. And I love it because one thing I've learned in all my years of life and therapy and seeing messes and all that is we all hear messages differently. So basically I'm going to package up a lot of the things that they've already said and just tell it to you differently, because maybe you'll hear it differently and you weren't hearing their message. So bear with me. Today I'm going to talk about what I call in my world intimacy disorders. A little bit of background: I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, but I fell in love with my work when I started working with drug and sex addiction. I worked at a treatment center there, so I kind of got to see the most extreme messiness of people struggling with the way they connect with other people. Really struggling with that process. And then when I went into private practice, I started working kind of with a more mild version of that, obviously because they're higher functioning enough to see me in a private practice setting, not residential treatment. And I would help couples transcend infidelity or help individuals recover from addiction, infidelity, betrayal, trauma, things like that. So I've learned a little bit personally and professionally about why we seem to struggle with relationships so much. And again, they've talked about it too, but I'm just going to say it in different ways. So why do we care? We are neurobiologically reinforced and created to have people around us. There's that tiny percentage of people that don't feel empathy and are kind of, I guess, like psychopaths. But for the most part, all of us feel hormones. Chemistry comes through our body to say, yes, connect with other people, or ouch, I'm feeling rejected, or I'm hurt, things like that. There's the things of when we hug or kiss or have sex, there's dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin. So we are neurobiologically reinforced to connect with other people. Yet at the same time, whilst the connections that we have with others when we have our babies, or we find our companions, or we have those deep talks with the friends, those create the wonderful hormones and chemistry. But we also feel the worst and most painful feelings when we're struggling to connect with others. Now, just to clarify, when I'm saying connect with others, I use the word intimacy. In our career field, like in the sex addiction world, we break it down. Intimacy is not just, let's say, sexual intercourse or something like that. It's into me you see. So it's the courage to be fully seen. And again, the previous speakers have been talking about that topic. So the subject, I always say that I like to give the example of showing how, and I'll talk about this a little bit later in a few more slides, that our culture struggles with intimacy. I know, because what's the most popular way of communicating with people these days? Text messages. Because I don't want to hear your voice, I don't want to talk about your day, I just want you to pick me up, or I just want to check in and say hi. You know, I just want to do the really quick, like, Cliff Notes version of connecting with you. And what's one of the most popular, time-consuming websites out there right now? Facebook. Good job, 2 for 2. Because I want to have 800 friends or 1,000 friends that I'm connecting and seeing pictures of their kids and finding out who's getting married or who's getting divorced, showing you what I ate for dinner last night, but I don't want you to know that my husband and I are seriously struggling, or that my daughter told me that she hated me last night, you know. So it's intimacy is showing all of yourself to somebody. The good, the bad, the light, the dark. And as we know, that takes a boatload of courage and vulnerability and truth. So why do we care about all this? Connecting, disconnection, all that kind of stuff, how to do it, why it's hard, blah, blah, blah. Is we need to talk about this stuff. We don't talk about it in schools. We're trying to talk about it in the homes, but it's basically, if you're aware of how you're really bad at it, and all the junk that you're bringing into it and setting it up on the table when you're trying to connect with someone, then the hope is that you'll change it. That's the big hope. So we talk about it, we figure out what our maladapted patterns are, and fingers crossed, slowly but surely, baby steps, we can make some changes. Okay? Next. So basically, why do we struggle with connecting with people? Let's talk about this. And I'll just say this as a side note. This is kind of a secular lecture, right? There's not as much God in it as they've been able to share scripture. And when I was finding my way back to God, I was really rebellious because, quite frankly, I hated him. And I needed to hear this message in a secular way because I was willing to hear it in these words, in this format. It spoke to me. But then through further work and further exploration, I was able to find the parallels between their version of the message and what I found was truthful to me in the capacity I was in. So bear with me with that. So as they all mentioned before, we are 100% dependent when we come out of the womb. I have a almost 7-week-old son, so I can verify that. But we're not like the sea turtles that like eggs pop out and they like run into the ocean and hopefully one out of the 5,000 of them survive the night. No, we cannot jump out of the womb, though my son did try to jump out of the womb and run away. We can't. So whether it's God or biology, because of those facts, or I guess both, we are made with these drives inside us, survivalism, to keep our caretakers in our life. So you'll find a lot of the characteristics that you have these days, things that you love about yourself or strongly value or maybe even hate, they're often things that you were really reinforced to be as you were grown, because you learn very quickly, these are my caretakers, keep them in my life, I need them to survive. So not only do we need food and water and shelter, we also need love, affection. In fact, there's been all those war-torn nations in the Eastern Europe areas like Sarajevo, they've been able to do some really amazing studies on newborns and their growth when they're given food and shelter, because a huge adult population was wiped out, and so there's hundreds and thousands of kids in orphanages being raised, and they're getting their food, they're getting their water, but they're not being helped. They're not being told they're enough. They're not being loved. And they don't thrive. They don't walk. They don't speak. And they struggle their whole life without that. So it just shows a strong burn inside us to not just get the food and shelter, but the love. The you are enough. I like to call it an obvious sign that we have a God magnet inside of us, because there is just no denying that we need to know that there's a purpose out there and that we're valuable, and we fall apart without it. So on to that next slide is the part where we start falling apart. On to the next slide. We are 100% dependent on caretakers. Unfortunately, they are flawed. So I probably already screwed up my son, and I've definitely already screwed up my 2 children, because I'm broken. But they need me, and they're 100% dependent on me. So and this is something that is really hard. I've heard versions of these lectures for so long, and I was like, what are you talking about? I had a perfect childhood. I had a mom and a dad, and smart, and we're in Southern California, we're mid-upper class, I have a great education. You're wrong. I'm perfect. I mean, little hiccups here and there, but that's it. Look, trauma, there's big T traumas, little t traumas. All of it impacts us. And so what I'm just trying to get across to you is that we experience these hiccups, and they build our brain, they make these strong impacts in our brain and our development. So there can be as obvious of a trauma, big T trauma, as sexual abuse, which she was talking about, physical abuse, these things that culturally we all raise our hand and go, oh yeah, that was a traumatic childhood. Or they could be these tiny little t traumas, which was, my parents were divorced, and they were running around raising 3 kids and busy, and I got picked up late all the flippin' time. Hour late, 45 minutes late. But when you're a child and the world is egocentric and your number one goal in life is to please your parents, your caretakers, and keep them in your life, when they don't show up hour after hour, day after day, you start getting an idea that you're imperfect and you might not be worthy and you might not be valuable. Now, I didn't quite have the complexities and communication skills and connection with my inside when my dad would roll up 45 minutes late and say, "Dad, that made me feel less valuable. Can you come on time next time?" No, I just stuffed it in somewhere and then ate a chocolate brownie. But nonetheless, you can see that whether it's a big T trauma or little T traumas, it starts developing what I call the meta messages, these subconscious or unconscious messages that I'm going to put myself out there to the world and I need to connect with humans, but I'm broken. I'm kind of powerless. If people keep taking advantage of me or I am abused of some kind, I'm powerless. Or the world's really scary. Or you know what, maybe I'm not enough. Or love is conditional. And these are the filters with which we experience everything. So keep that in mind. Next. And then it's further magnified by what I just call the serendipity effect. Okay, so what I went through is kind of what standard experiences are, but then it gets magnified by just everything, what's your socioeconomic class, where do you live geographically, your time in history, birth order. I worked with a lot of gay men in the drug and sex addiction world, and it was really fascinating to work with a gay male who was 50 and grew up in the deep South, and a 25-year-old gay male who just graduated from Yale, who, by the way, they call Yale the gay man's Ivy League, because it's just a very accepting liberal environment. So that was my point, is that it's a place where they're accepted and they're not shamed and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, my point is that tiny things like that you can be from a family, and every child is going to have a different manifestation of these struggles, because the serendipity effect, the things that are outside of them, that's the point. It's going to magnify, mitigate, or aggravate that. Next. So, I was running the other day and I heard a song from the owner of a lonely heart, much better than an owner of a broken heart. And I was like, hey, that reminds me of the slide. So I wrote it down because I thought you guys need a little comedic break in the middle so you could stay alive. I know I'm like the fifth person talking right now. So, because the theme of that is we have to find our escape. We got to connect, right? Because we are neurobiologically driven. This is my way of pointing our feelings. This is where we have feelings. These are our thoughts. This is where we have feelings. And then we have our actions. So we are neurobiologically driven to connect with other humans. But that is scary. It hurts. Sometimes it feels great. Most of the time it sucks. And so we seek out very naturally our escapes. So we try to fill our tank, but we kind of do it in an artificial way. And this is where the crises come from. This is when I step in. Is we find our ways in substance abuse, in various addictions. We overspend. How many people have a little more credit card debt than they want to admit that they have? We overeat. How many people struggle with that? We overdate. Because we think there's that person out there that's going to complete us and make me worthy and enough. We overwork, because once I get that promotion or I get that salary, then I'll be enough. Or overachieve. I love gold stars. I was so sad when I graduated college, not because of the fun that I was getting out of, but because I lost my grading system. I was like, who's going to grade me now? I looked to my husband, but he wasn't a very good grader, so I had to work through that. So, comedy, sarcasm, apathy. This is the way that we seek out to feel alive, to feel the completeness as if we are being intimate and true and showing ourselves to others, but it's in a false way. One of my mentors who helped me learn a lot about this, he said, it's like eating peanut M&Ms to stop being hungry. When you do life this way, is for a second, it tastes great. And for a second, you're not hungry. But then you feel crappy because it's really bad for you and you're starving 3 seconds later. That's what we do in life. So we eat peanut M&Ms and think we're gonna stop being hungry. We do it, and the last thing is powerless and unmanageability. So step 1 in the 12 steps is that you first realize that you are powerless to something and your life's become unmanageable because of it. People don't have to take the diagnosis of addict on to realize that we all do things to levels of powerlessness and our lives have become unmanageable as a consequence of it. So, next one. So these are the 3 constructs that I generally believe that we operate out of. I know I operate in all 3 of them at different times depending on where I'm at in my world. And it's that, you know what? People are really scary. I put myself out there, I show myself, and I get rejected, and this feels yucky. So you know what? I am not needy. I am powerful. In my treatment centers, I had lots of Fortune 500 executives because they decided, actually I remember someone was so hurt, he'd been so shamed his whole life, that he was like, you know what? I am not excluded, I'm exclusive. And he worked his booty off to be that way. The next one is, you know what? Every time I try to get my needs met, it doesn't work. They don't hear me, or I'm not doing it. It just doesn't happen. So you know what? I'm going to meet my needs by just serving everybody else. I'm just going to run on that treadmill, run and run and run. I'm going to handle 5,000 things, and I'm going to get my needs met. But by watching everyone else get their needs met. But really, when I see that you're also not running on a treadmill to, meet needs, I'm going to get really pissed and feel really passive aggressive and be really resentful that you're not reciprocating or matching, or that I'm still just starving inside. And the third one is, you know what, forget it. I just can't trust anyone to meet my needs. Moving on. I'm just going to get a cat. Well, sometimes cats can meet needs, let's be honest. So we're operating out of those 3 things. So what we do then, because of all these experiences, is we do what's called controlled intimacy. It was a little bit about what I was talking about before regarding the text messages on Facebook. We think vulnerability and putting ourselves out there and being seen and having relationships with others, that, we're gonna do it, but it can suck sometimes. So maybe I'll just control it. Right. So again, through the text messages, through the Facebook, and through the ways that I was talking about, in kind of the superficiality of our culture, you can see the way that we're all trying to control the way that we're connecting with other people. So because a lot of us in our culture, vulnerability is weakness, or it's pain, or it's cheesy or annoying. So there's also that thing was emotional, physical, intellectual intimacy. There's 3 different ways that we can connect with people in an intimate way. And so we will use controlled intimacy to maybe hold back on our emotions. We won't share all our emotions. We won't physically touch or be intimate with those that it's appropriate to be intimate with. And intellectually share our thoughts, our idea. Any of you guys, when you have this really great idea about something, and you go, oh, no one cares, I'm not going to share it. It's you're holding back on who you are. And that there's shame, that I'm bad, I'm not enough. So what now? We automatically bring onto the table in any relationship all of this junk. And why do we care? What do we do about it? It's a lot of the stuff that they've already said, basically. We need to know who we are, what we represent, what we want to stand for, what our values are, what our boundaries are. That's very important. What our non-negotiables are, etc. most of the people that come in to my office who are in crisis don't really know any of those things. I struggle with a lot of those things. It's a daily practice, and it's a daily exploration, especially the boundaries thing. That's really hard. You need to know your shame triggers. So we talk a lot about shame and what it is, but you gotta know your junk that you're bringing in. Like, I know in my body when I'm in shame. I know what it feels like. And I know what a lot of my shame triggers are. It's when someone tells me that I'm being selfish or inconsiderate, because in my world I feel like I'm running on a treadmill trying to make everyone happy, so I know that's going on when I hear that and respond to that. Anything around like being a bad mom or something freaks me out and makes me super defensive. I mean, you gotta take an inventory and kind of be the first person to be able to get up on stage and list what your strengths and weaknesses are. Because when you're in relationship with another person, that's what's coming out of you. It's not what they're saying to you. It's what you are pouring out of your pores, is your shame, your triggers. So you gotta be a master of knowing your shame triggers. The other thing I added was, keep your side of the street clean, and accountability. They talked about that, the accountability thing. It's huge. I crave being around people who are not yes men, who will tell me no, or tell me that they think there's a better way, or that don't have my feet on the ground. I want that because I know my shame triggers and I've worked out my shame stuff, so I can handle hearing that stuff. It still hurts, don't get me wrong. I don't like to be wrong, but I need to keep my side of the street clean, and I'm not always right about it, so I gotta keep people around me who can help me with that. So, and explore your willingness to be vulnerable, but, and put yourself out there without fear or shame. And remember, people are flawed, but God is not. And that people are disappointing. People will fall short. I will fall short, and I will disappoint every day. Every day. And so I try to start the day off with that humbleness so I can show other people that grace. And know that God is not any of those things. He's dependable. He keeps his promise. He follows through. And that is why I'm supposed to have a daily relationship with him, because people will fall short again. So I think that the next slide is just, I have a lot of videos, video YouTube things on like healthy relationships, healthy boundaries, addiction, infidelity. So I just want to encourage you, if you want to see any more of those subjects, I have a website that I've worked very hard on, so there's some more information for you on that. That's it.
Thank you.